This is the Brattlecast. I'm Jordan Rich, and I have the great honor of sitting down with my dear friend Ken Gloss, the proprietor of the Brattle Bookshop in Boston on West Street. Absolute treasure. You have to check it out if you come to town. People in town know about it, and they flock to it, and it's a good thing. Well, they say the most popular book ever published or written or sold is the Bible. I guess that's true.
Well, that's as far as I know it is.
Right.
And
But we thought we'd explore with you a bit more about the Bible and the Bible books themselves.
Well, we'll do that, just barely touch the surface, because obviously the history of the Bible and Bibles, we could go on forever. And we can also go off in a few directions that people might not be quite expecting, of chances, encounters, conversations I've had with people in the Bible. But the Bible is the most commonly printed book of all time, always has been, probably always will be. And I sometimes get 8-10 calls a week with people who have 100, 200-year-old family Bibles wanting to know what they're worth. And in almost all those cases, I have to say, if this is your Bible and this has been handed down in your family, sentimentally, it's priceless. Monetarily, maybe not so much. It's a common book. Now, these big old family Bibles from the mid to late 1800s with the beautiful clasps, the beautiful leather bindings, they can sell in the $100 to $300 range. They make wonderful gifts for ministers, priests, divinity students, but break one clasp, have one hinge go, and they lose all that value. Now, another value to those are sometimes in the beginning, middle, of end of those, there's a list of births, deaths, marriages, whatever. And in many cases, they're very valuable to the local historical or genealogical society. But they don't want the whole Bible. They just want to either digitally copy it, Xerox it, write down the data. One of the problems with big family Bibles, unless there's something very definite written in them, is they take up a lot of room. So a lot of historical societies won't collect them. They might copy the information in them, but they don't want the Bible because of the space. But there are valuable Bibles. The Gutenberg Bible is the first printed book in Western culture. It was done in 1456. A single page of the Gutenberg Bible, which you can get, all you need is about $50,000 to $150,000
For one page.
For one page.
Yeah.
And the price varies depending on what the page is, how important a page is, what the page says. Also, some of them have decorations along the side a little bit nicer than others. Now, if you really want to get the whole Gutenberg Bible, first of all, if you have one chance, you're probably only going to one chance ever. There aren't any real copies known very much in private hands, but if you have a few $100 million, you could probably start thinking about it.
A few $100 million.
Yeah,
here I thought I could read it on Kindle, and I'd rather have the real thing.
You could probably read it, a copy of it, and see a copy on Kindle.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting where you can go with Bible, because different places. The first Bible printed in a certain language, the first Bible printed in a country. It's an interesting thing is Bibles printed in English were actually illegal in the United States to do in the United States.
Is that right?
Yeah, you could not legally print a Bible in English in the United States. The reason for that? The British. They had a monopoly, and they didn't want Bibles printed here. They wanted you had to buy them from English publishers. They wanted you to have the Bible. They just wanted to make sure they made money on it.
I see.
So the first Bible printed in America was actually in the 1600s in Natick, Massachusetts, but it was a Bible printed in the Natick language of the Indians, and that they would allow. Then there was probably the next one was a Bible printed in Pennsylvania, which was in German, because we had a huge German population, and that sort of snuck by that they could get a Bible printed in German. And the first Bible printed in America by an American publisher was a man named Isaiah Thomas, who was in Worcester, Massachusetts, but it was after the Revolution. So there you
all
go.
bets are off at that point. The British didn't have a say. What would a Bible that is most famous, say the Lincoln Bible that presidents have taken their oath on, that would be pretty valuable, I would
Well,
imagine.
of course, anytime you talk about something that's a one-of-a-kind Bible, you're talking into the hundreds of thousands of millions. My father actually one time got called in to appraise the Bible that Kennedy took his oath of office on, and I think at the time it was $30,000 or $40,000. Now it would be a lot more, but those are one of a kind. And what you get there is not so much collectors of the Bible necessarily, but you get the collectors of the Bible plus collectors of presidential material plus collectors of American history. So when you broaden the number of people interested, the price goes up.
Does the Bible collection begin in 1456 with the official printing by Gutenberg? In other words, are there any that you know of copies of the Bible that were predating that?
Well, there was just recently a Hebrew text of the Bible, the Old Testament, that went back, I think, into the oldest ever done, I think into the 1300s, 1200s, and it sold for $30 million. So, yes, I mean, there were obviously there were Bibles right from almost the time of Christ or just after, and there was the Old Testament that there were handwritten copies.
Right.
Those yes, they kept going, and then you have the first printed one, and then you have ones before. And you can run into all sorts of interesting situations. The one I'm going to save for another podcast, but I'll just sort of throw it out there. I'm going to do one on Bible eating. That's
okay.
Just wait. We'll have a
That's
future.
That's called a tease in the podcast
a tease.
world.
But I one time, and this is where you can go with it sometimes. I one time got a call in a very large old church in Boston, well over 100 years old. And the church wanted me in because they had a large library just to see whether they had any valuable books. Spent a whole day there. It was a lot of fun. End of the day, the priest said to me, could you come down the basement, a few more books? Looked at the few more books. And then there was a closet, or it was a small room. It was about the size of the studio, which nobody other than us can see. But let's say it's a small room, not a closet. And the priest opened the door, floor to ceiling, top to bottom, front to back. It was stuffed with thousands of old Bibles. And I looked at the priest and I said, what is this? And he said, well, people hate to throw away a book. They feel it's sacrilegious to throw away a Bible.
Especially a Bible, right?
Yeah. And so he says, what happens when a parishioner dies and the family doesn't want the Bible? They come to the church and they present it to the church. And he says, what do? We very graciously accept it. We don't want to offend anybody. Then we go downstairs to the room, open the door, put it in with the rest of them. And he says, and we can't drive a dumpster up to the back of the church and fill it with Bibles.
Wow.
That would be terrible. So I use it as an example to say, if you want to give something to a charity, ask them if they want it first. If they really don't want it, you're not doing them a favor. But if a charity does want it, it's great. And
I think it all boils down to what we said at the beginning, what you talked about, and that is this sense of family a family generational history that is very, very special to these individual families. Now, obviously, there will be famous families where a Bible might be much more interesting to look at. And valuable.
I actually heard of a case that someone wanted to give Paul Revere's Bible to this institution, and they basically said no. And the reason they said no, at least the story I heard, is because all he did was write his name in it. He didn't, if he had put marginal notes and talked about the Bible, but they said, we just don't have room for that. One thing I will say, though, they made sure that it got to the Paul Revere house and can be shown as an exhibit where it's very...
In the north end of Boston.
Yeah, where it really is representative. But they said unless the Bible has more in it than just a name, it doesn't add historically tremendously.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. We covered it from the old to the new and to the published and the printed, and We still just scratched the surface, but it's a fascinating subject. The most popular book in the world, the Bible.
And wait for Bible eaters. The
Yes,
episode.
okay. All right. He's Ken Gloss. I'm Jordan Rich. Thank you. You've been listening to the Brattlecast.